Good afternoon, in fact, good evening from London. It's a bright July afternoon here, and hello to all dear comrades, friends, and supporters from me, Dr. Dermot Hudson, the chairman of the British Group for the Study of the Juche idea, chairman of the Korean Friendship Association of the UK, and official delegate of KFA for the UK, and of course, the owner of this very self-same channel, Songam 007, the militant voice of Songam and Juche in the UK, defending people's career with no ifs or buts, and indeed, probably the only pro-DPRK, pro-Juche YouTube channel from the UK. And of course, today is a very solemn day because this is the day that, on the 8th of July 1994, President Kim Il-sung passed away very suddenly. July 8th is always a poignant and reflective day for all of us who are true friends of people's career and followers of the great Juche idea. President Kim Il-sung departed from physical existence at the age of 82 whilst working on important state documents in his office on the 8th of July 1994, some 31 years ago. Now, I was actually visiting the DPRK, leading a delegation of the then Juche Idea Study Group of England, which is now the British Group for the Study of the Juche Idea, in June 1994. And I'd only been back to Britain 6 days when the terrible and tragic news of the passing away of President Kim Il-sung was announced. And in fact, I learnt this through probably the worst way, through a sudden announcement on BBC Radio 4 when I was staying at my mother's house in Winchester. And it was very shocking, and I found it quite unbelievable. Anyway, when we were in the DPRK, we saw television footage of President Kim Il-sung giving on-the-spot guidance and meeting foreign guests. For example, Ludo Martins of the Workers' Party of Belgium, which in those days was a militant anti-revisionist party. We also saw pictures of President Kim Il-sung in the Rudon Sinmun newspaper of the Workers' Party of Korea. Little did we know that these were the last days of President Kim Il-sung's physical life. June 1994 was my third visit to People's Korea, my first being in May 1992. Visiting the DPRK, I was to see and witness with my own eyes the people-centred socialism of Juche that had been built under the leadership of great President Kim Il-sung. The early 1990s were days of turmoil, confusion, disillusion, and retreat for the socialist forces and the international communist movement. Yet, one country, and one country alone, stood out as an oasis of calm and as a beacon, as a country truly upholding socialist principles. That country was People's Korea, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, founded and led by great President Kim Il-sung. Staying in the DPRK in the early 1990s, I witnessed how the DPRK was unaffected by the catastrophic events that had unfolded in the USSR and in other socialist countries like the former East Germany or the German Democratic Republic, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. Socialism in People's Korea was solid. It was unbreakable. I remember thinking one night, amidst an atmosphere of calm which was so unlike the chaotic capitalist world, that socialism in People's Korea would last 1,000 years or 10,000 years. There were no signs of decay or degeneration, which I had noticed when I visited Eastern Europe in the 1980s. In People's Korea, there was no revisionist backsliding. No one wanted glasnost, quote unquote, or perestroika, quote unquote, or reform and opening up. Instead, people expressed their resolve to continue along the road of socialism, the road of Juche. I remember a researcher called Kim Dae-jin saying to me when we sat on a mountain path, as you can see, socialism in our country is victorious. On another trip, our driver said, Gorbachev should be denounced. It was thanks to President Kim Il-sung's leadership that not only had socialism in the DPRK been built splendidly, but the DPRK, despite the raging storms of anti-socialism, continued along the path of socialism, defying the threats of the imperialists who wanted to overturn socialism. When perestroika appeared and some people cheered it on, even saying they wanted to introduce perestroika in their own countries. Yes, this is quite true. I can remember certain so-called British communists, again, quote unquote, saying they wanted to introduce perestroika in Britain. God knows what that really meant. But President Kim Il-sung saw through it. In December 1986, he gave a speech titled For the Complete Victory of Socialism to the Supreme People's Assembly, in which he said, and I quote, the People's Government must guard against the poisonous ideas of capitalism and revisionism, and resolutely fight against all attempts to infringe upon the socialist system. In another speech in 1989, President Kim Il-sung said, I quote, careless opening may allow mosquitoes and blowflies to fly in and cause damage. In 1990, President Kim Il-sung emphatically stated there should not be the slightest retreat from socialism, saying that socialism can only be built on socialist principles and by socialist methods. All the problems arising in the building of socialism must always be solved on the basis of socialist theories, on the principle of bringing the advantages of socialism into play, and by giving rein to the inexhaustible creativity of the popular masses, the motive force of the revolution. When the situation is complex and the reactionary offensive is being stepped up, the revolutionary people must hold fast to the revolutionary principles in advance, holding higher the banner of socialism. End of quotation. When the countries such as the USSR that had abandoned socialism were suffering plummeting living standards and mass unemployment, and the capitalist countries were in crisis and we were being told to tighten our belts, President Kim Il-sung took far-reaching measures to improve living standards. On the 13th of February 1992, President Kim Il-sung had the decree of the Central People's Committee of the DPRK titled on enforcing the policy of pay rises for all workers, technicians and office employees, and of increasing the income of office workers, which was to be effective from the 1st of March 1992. Pay for workers, office workers, and technicians was to increase by 43.4%. Social Security payments for pensioners were to be increased by 50.7%. The scholarships of students were to rise by 33%. Prices paid for farmers for rice would be raised by 26.2% and for maize by 44.8% in order to boost the income of farmers. At the same time, it was decreed that there should be no increase to the prices of food. I mean, reading that again, you feel truly that People's Korea is a true socialist paradise, a workers' paradise, a people's paradise. Yeah, and I don't care what anyone says about the DPRK. It is number one in applying the people first policy. And also in 1992, flats for 50,000 people, that's roughly up to 150 to 250,000 people, roughly the equivalent of up to the size of Nottingham in the UK, were completed in Pyongyang. Thus, people enjoyed a great leap forward in living standards thanks to the people's policy of President Kim Il-sung and the superiority of the Juche-based socialist system built under his leadership. When others betrayed socialism with the basest and meanest of excuses, President Kim Il-sung defended socialism and upheld socialist principles to the very end of his life. We remember him for this. Glory to the eternal memory of the great leader, President Kim Il-sung. Long live Juche, long live self-reliance. Thank you very much for watching this video today. Please hit the subscribe button and share content from the channel as much as possible. Remember, we are the only pro-Juche, pro-DPRK YouTube channel in the UK. And you can support us in all sorts of other ways. I think the most important thing is to actually come to our events and find out about the reality of People's Korea there. We'll be rolling out some more events shortly. We had a very good meeting in Scotland. It was absolutely incredible, far better than I thought. Standing room only in the meeting room. It was really good. We need to repeat that, and we need to get more of our own people coming to our events. You can also read all about the reality of People's Korea and the what the Juche idea means in numerous of my books that I've written and also been written by other authors in KFA UK. There'll be a link in the description, and you can donate money to KFA UK or to myself. I say thank you for watching. There's going to be a live stream on Friday. Please join me for that. I wish everybody a very good evening and goodbye. See you soon.